Alright, this is part 4 of my series examining Carl Baugh's television program, Creation in the 21st Century. This particular episode is entitled Down from the Trees and stars Ian Juby from the Canadian Creation Science Museum. And I'm going to take up, now where we left off, Ian Juby was going to start in talking about Owen Lovejoy and what absolute fraud Owen Lovejoy did when he reconstructed the pelvis of AL-288, the fossil known as Lucy. Okay. Now before I get into it a little bit more, I'm going to show the clip I showed last time and then just do a brief discussion before I go on to the rest.
Now this next part is hard to believe. When I say, I don't like using the word fraudulent, but in this case, I think I'm going to make an exception.
Admit that has occurred.
There's no other word for it. When they found the skeleton, the hip had been broken into about 40 pieces, okay? And it was a very chimp hip.
Certainly.
So
I've seen replications.
Yes. Now the problem is the knee appears to be from a creature that walks upright, but it doesn't match the hip, which was more like chimp-like from a creature that did not walk upright.
I'd like to challenge Professor Juby to explain exactly what about the pelvis of AL-288 was extremely chimp-like. What name some chimp features of this pelvis? I'd love to hear a couple. It's really hilarious to me because even if you read the original descriptions, if you read the pop science reporting of the discovery of the pelvis, as it was being taken out of the ground, the researchers noticed all of the human-like characteristics of it. The only chimp-like characteristic was that in its distorted form, the blade pointed backwards more than it would in a bipedal organism. Okay, but it was never taken that this would have been. Nobody ever once looked at that and thought this must be the natural shape of this, because it was very, very clear that the pelvis was distorted. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to go on here and hear the rest of this piece of shit's lies.
So you've heard of the television program Nova?
Oh, yes.
I'm still amazed they actually did this. They were brazen enough to reconstruct what Owen Lovejoy, their forensic expert, did. He took all the 40 pieces and made a copy of each one. He then took those pieces and he took a Dremel, a little mini hand grinder, ground each piece down, re-glued it back together, voila! Now the hip looks half human, half ape.
But that's fraudulent fabrication.
Would that show up in a court of law?
No.
I don't think so.
It would be thrown out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine trying to convict someone of a crime that, well, the evidence didn't quite point to this person, but no problem. We know it was that person.
Not just contaminated, completely restructured.
Yes.
That is unforgivable.
It is, and it is unscientific. And yet, Lucy has been promoted as one of the best pieces of evidence for human evolution.
Yes.
And it's downright fraudulent.
So, again, now he says here that this is so laughable because even if you watch the original Nova video, it doesn't even claim it there. In fact, as far as I know, he took Menton's bastardization of the story and then took it even further, as he seems to be prone to do. Lovejoy never took all 40 pieces of this pelvis. Remember, he's trying to imply that this thing was shattered into 40 pieces, and then Lovejoy took each of the 40 pieces with a grinder and ground them so that they fit together like a human pelvis. That's what he wants you guys to believe. Now, the reality is the pelvis was mostly intact. Where it was broken and fused into a solid piece was at the sacroiliac joint, okay? So a portion of it was broken and then refused into that position. Now, I got permission from a friend of mine, Dan-Mill23, to use a section of his video where he does a 3D computer animation to demonstrate exactly what Lovejoy did. And I want you to think about what actually happened and compare that to Juby's version of events. And I encourage you, I'll put a link down in the crotch bar. Check out Dan Mill's original video at full length. I cut out a bunch of stuff on it. I didn't want to just present his video entire, so I just took some of the clips out of it that demonstrate what I'm talking about here. So here he is.
All right. So look, when I was, investigating all of this hip bone business with Dr. Lovejoy, it was really hard to work out exactly what he did. Now, I suppose, Nephilim, you're justified in some way that you know that he took to it with an angle grinder. Who knows what he got up to, It's very difficult to understand it from just reading text. So, I've gone a little bit further than that. The next picture I just want to show you is this. And this is, this is Lucy's hip bone. This is the Australopithecus hip bone. And it's like, what is going on here? It's very difficult to understand. But, up here is the broken bit, the deformity. This is where it's squished. It's this. Okay? You saw from the ilium before, these blades extend up. They're flat. This is clearly broken. Those are shards of bone that have come away. Okay? And that is the top bit, the top rounded bit of the blade. This edge here is over here. This is broken. And this is what Dr. Lovejoy repaired. So let's have a look at it in 3D. Alright, so this is the model that I downloaded. Remember, this is a human hip bone, but I'm using this as an example. First of all, what is this bit? Where is this? Well, I can't make any sense out of what's going on there. Well, just back to the diagram just for a sec. It's this area, just here, where the ilium meets the sacrum. Alright? Okay, so here's the hip bone. Okay, just like in one of these pictures. Okay, hip bone, and now I will rotate the hip bone so that it's at the same angle as this picture to show you where it is and what this picture means. Here we go. Through the wonders of 3D. Here we go. And there it is. Alright. There's our little holy bit, and there's our long blady bit, and there's the blady bit at the top of the crest of the ilium. Alright, and so we've got this squished bit. So what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to squish it. And the same way. And squish! They found, okay, the sacrum-y thing, whatever it was called, I've forgotten now. Yeah, the sacrum and this blade, this ilium thing. And it had this bent bit, as we've already seen, and then Dr. Owen Lovejoy, in that, even in the Nova video, right, even in the lame Nova video, claimed and showed how these two things had become fused together. Okay, remember that the good doctor knows that the sacroiliac joint is supposed to be in between there. There's supposed to be a gap. Alright, so he knows that gap is supposed to be there. And so again, through the wonders of computer animation, I will show you exactly, and I read like all the documents, alright, and I took this from the pictures that they showed me and the verbal description that they had written. This is what he did. He first of all separated the two pieces, which, and I've exaggerated it, is producing the sacroiliac joint. But he can't leave it there. That bit is not right. That is not right. And it goes, they say at lengths in both documents that this has to be repaired for the evidence to be valuable, for us to make useful information out of this. And so he repaired it, and he did that. And that is what Dr. Owen Lovejoy did to the Lucy hip bone. He repaired it so that we could examine it for evidence. Thank you.
Just to add one more thing to this, I'd forgotten to mention earlier, is that the repaired version of Lucy's hip bone, Lucy's pelvis, matches other Australopithecine pelvises that we have, okay? None of the other ones that were found were broken and distorted like AL288 was, okay? So, as an additional bit of evidence that he did nothing fraudulent, is that in its restored condition, it looks very similar to the pelvises of other species of Australopithecines we have, okay? So I thought I'd make that point as well.
And by the way, late in Richard Leakey's life, he admitted that he had found totally human remains in a lower stratum than his earlier hominid.
All right, this made me laugh. Okay, this really made me laugh to the point where I rewatched it just to make sure that I wasn't being mistaken in what was being said here. At least in the first part, but he first of all, okay, he says Richard Leakey, and they show the slide of Richard Leakey, Louis Leakey's son. Richard Leakey's alive and well. He meant Louis Leakey because I've heard the story before, and it's Louis Leakey's the one that they tell the story about. He just messed up the name, and apparently whoever was editing the video threw in Richard Leakey. That right there is kind of funny. But the part about it that made me laugh the most, that's truly funny, and now this is kind of a ramble here, I apologize, but creationists love the deathbed confession. Okay, for some reason, I don't know if it's because they're projecting, their own fears or their own worldview upon everybody else, but they seem to really get off on that. They seem to love to add that sort of add some power to their story, that it was as if you can lie all you want while you're alive, but on your deathbed you're going to be stripped down to your bare honest truth, or that kind of thing. So that's why they Darwin clutched his wife's hand and said it's all lies, that story they tell, or Eugene Dubois, discoverer of Homo erectus, that on his deathbed confessed that it was the skull of a gibbon, and that underneath his floorboards he had a modern human skeleton that was older than supposedly Erectus was, and these either distortions or outright lies that they like to tell, and this is another one of those. The truth of the story is that early in his career, not late in his life, early in his career, his first major find, in fact, reported in his book Adam's Ancestors from 1933, Kanjerra Man. Now, he found a modern type skeleton in deposits that were roughly at that time aged. I think it was, the rough age on it was like 1.5 million years old. So very old, but completely modern skeleton. And when he published initial reports of this, other anthropologists came to East Africa, came to Olduvai to examine his finds. And when they examined his finds, I guess it wasn't, maybe I might be wrong on it being Olduvai. I have to look up the location again, but that's not important. When they examined his finds, it was clear to everybody that he had mistaken an intrusive burial, meaning where a skeleton had been buried, where the person digging the grave had dug down through multiple layers, multiple things, buried a skeleton underneath it. The skeleton wasn't from that depth. It had been placed at that depth. And there's a whole bunch of archaeologists use different things to determine whether or not this happened, and it was clear to the anthropologists that Leakey had completely screwed up and not caught this, whether purposefully or whatever it is. The point is that he mistook this for an actual the layer it was supposed to be in. It was exposed, and it actually hurt later on in his life his credibility, meaning that his legitimate finds were suspect because of the fact that he'd made this mistake early in his career, publicly made this mistake. He later withdrew it and admitted that it was wrong. So that's where this story comes from. And again, they love to tell these. But this is really funny. Now we're going to go on here. Now this is what Juby takes from this story.
Than his earlier hominid fossils.
Was that the Canopoi fossils by chance?
I think probably so.
Okay, I tried to find information on those, and strangely, the evolutionists don't want to talk about them.
No, they don't.
Canopoi? Wow, you know absolutely nothing about the subject you're talking about, do you? Leakey never found Canopoi. I'll talk about that in part 5.